small rural town in New South Wales, Australia, called Leeton. With only around 10,000 residents, it's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. Rolling farmlands stretch as far as the eye can see, and the pace of life moves at a comfortable rhythm. In 2015, this peaceful community was home to 26-year-old Stephanie Scott. Friends and family knew her by her sweet nickname, Button, a name that perfectly captured her warm, approachable personality. Stephanie had everything going for her. She was engaged to Aaron Leeson Woolley, her childhood friend turned soulmate. Their love story was like something out of a movie. They'd grown up together, playing sports and building memories as kids. But it wasn't until Aaron's 21st birthday party that friendship blossomed into something deeper. Now, years later, they were planning their dream wedding. Stephanie was following in her father Robert's footsteps as an educator. She taught English and drama at Leeton High School, and she absolutely loved what she did. Her colleagues respected her dedication, and her students adored her enthusiasm. She wasn't just teaching subjects, she was shaping young minds and making a real difference in her community. April 11, 2015 was circled on their calendar in red. That was their wedding day. Stephanie, being the perfectionist she was, had spent months planning every single detail. The venue was booked, the honeymoon in Tahiti was arranged, and she just had her bachelorette party. The only thing left was perfecting their first dance. They'd been taking lessons together, wanting everything to be absolutely perfect. But fate had other plans. The first weekend of April arrived, and excitement filled the air. The big day was just around the corner. Aaron had been invited to a party out of town and asked Stephanie if she wanted to join him. But Stephanie, ever responsible, decided to stay behind. She still had a few last-minute things to sort out. One of those things was preparing work for her students while she'd be away on her honeymoon. As a dedicated teacher, she couldn't just disappear for weeks without making sure her classes would continue smoothly. She needed to create detailed lesson plans for the substitute teacher who would take her place. April 5th, 2015 was Easter Sunday. Most people were spending the day with family, enjoying holiday meals and relaxation. But Stephanie had work on her mind. Around 11 a.m., she grabbed her car keys and headed to Leeton High School. The school felt different on weekends, quieter, almost eerily peaceful. Stephanie parked her car and met up with a colleague who lived nearby. Together, they walked to the school gates. The security was tight at Leeton High. 2 sets of locked steel gates that required special keys. Only approved staff members had access. After unlocking the gates, Stephanie kept hold of the keys and made her way to the English teacher's staff room. She settled in at a computer and got to work. First, she sent an email to a bus company confirming transportation arrangements for their wedding guests. Then she dove into preparing the handover materials for her substitute. For the next couple of hours, Stephanie worked diligently. She was in her element, organized, focused, and happy, knowing that everything was falling into place. Finally, around 1:30 in the afternoon, she felt satisfied with her progress. Everything was sorted out perfectly, just as she'd planned. She packed up her things, put the admin building keys in her bag, and started walking toward the exit. As she moved through the hallway, she called out to one of the cleaning staff members, wishing them a happy Easter. Her voice echoed cheerfully through the empty corridors. Stephanie had no idea that those would be the last words she would ever speak freely. Aaron knew Stephanie would be at school for a few hours, so he wasn't immediately worried when she didn't answer his texts right away. But as the afternoon turned into evening, a knot began forming in his stomach. They'd been texting back and forth that morning, getting quick replies as usual. But since the middle of the afternoon, there had been complete silence. That wasn't like Stephanie at all. By 7:20 p.m., Aaron arrived home expecting to see Stephanie's car in the driveway and the lights on inside their house. Instead, he found darkness and an empty driveway. He tried to push down the panic rising in his chest. Maybe the stress of the wedding had gotten to her. Maybe she needed some space to clear her head. But even as he tried to rationalize it, Aaron knew this explanation didn't fit. Stephanie had been excited about their wedding, not stressed. Just the day before, she'd been happily telling her students about her dress and the wedding menu. This was a woman who was ready to start her new life, not someone who would suddenly go silent. Aaron tossed and turned all night, checking his phone every few minutes. By early morning, he couldn't wait any longer. He started calling Stephanie's family, hoping against hope that someone had heard from her. Nobody had. At 4:30 that afternoon, over 24 hours since anyone had last heard from Stephanie, Aaron walked into the Leeton police station with heavy steps and a racing heart. He reported his fiancée missing. The police immediately began considering possibilities. Since her car was also missing, they wondered if she might have left the school and gotten into an accident. Maybe she'd rolled into a ditch or creek somewhere along the rural roads. Helicopters took to the skies, searching the vast countryside around Leeton. Officers on the ground headed straight to Stephanie's last known location, the high school. Because it was Easter Sunday, very few people had been at the school. This was actually helpful for investigators. It meant they had fewer people to interview, but also fewer potential witnesses. The alarm system in Stephanie's classroom told a clear story. She had disarmed it at 1:31 p.m. and rearmed it at 1:38 p.m. So they knew she'd been in her classroom during that 7-minute window. But after that, the electronic trail went cold. They tried using Find My iPhone, but her phone was turned off. Her bank accounts showed no activity since Saturday. Her social media had been silent since the weekend. By April 7th, just 2 days after her disappearance, social media appeals were spreading like wildfire. One post was shared over 1,500 times in just a few hours. Local news stations picked up the story, and hundreds of community members joined the search efforts. But with each passing day, hope was fading fast. Stephanie's mother, Marilyn, spoke the words that everyone was thinking, but nobody wanted to say, "I think if we don't find her today, you can't let yourself think about it." But you do. As police continued their investigation at the school, they uncovered some interesting witness accounts. One person who'd been near Leeton High School on Easter Sunday remembered hearing strange noises around 2 p.m. Sounds like things being moved or dragged across the ground. This witness had also seen Stephanie's car parked under a covered walkway, though they didn't think anything unusual about it at the time. But they did notice that the car had disappeared later. Then came a more troubling piece of information. A school employee approached detectives about a strange conversation she'd had with one of the school's cleaners the Monday morning after Stephanie's disappearance. The school was buzzing with worry and speculation about what had happened to their beloved colleague. This employee had asked the cleaner if he'd seen Stephanie before she vanished. He said he hadn't. Then she asked if he thought maybe Stephanie had gotten cold feet about the wedding and run away. The cleaner's response sent chills down her spine. He let out what she described as an odd and completely inappropriate giggle. His reaction left her feeling deeply uneasy. Even more disturbing, his face was covered in fresh scratches. The cleaner was 24-year-old Vincent Stanford. When detectives brought Vincent in for questioning, his story seemed straightforward at first. He said he'd popped into the school briefly on Easter Sunday to empty some garbage bins, even though he wasn't scheduled to work. He claimed he hadn't been there long because he needed to go grocery shopping afterward. Vincent insisted he hadn't seen Stephanie while he was there and couldn't help with their search. His parting words were casual, almost too casual. "Good luck with your search." But when police checked the details of his story, things didn't add up. Security cameras had captured Vincent's vehicle leaving the school just after 3:30 p.m. When officers called the grocery store he claimed to have visited, they discovered it had been closed that day due to the Easter holiday. Why would Vincent lie about something so easily verifiable? He was now officially a person of interest. Police returned to interview Vincent more thoroughly, this time at his mother's house where he lived. When they arrived, Vincent wasn't home, but his mother gave them permission to look around. What they found changed everything. Hidden in the house were a set of keys attached to a distinctive red and white lanyard, keys that perfectly matched the description of Stephanie's school keys. As they were documenting this evidence, Vincent returned home in his car. Police immediately seized the vehicle and made a shocking discovery in the back. MDF boards stained with what appeared to be blood. Outside the house, they found tire tracks that didn't match Vincent's vehicle, along with a used condom. The wrapper for that condom was found inside Vincent's bedroom. When detectives asked where he'd been that day, Vincent pointed to a camera sitting on his front passenger seat, claiming he'd been out taking photographs. The officers asked if they could examine the camera. Vincent shrugged and said, "Sure." When they turned on the camera, what they saw made their blood run cold. The first images on the device were photographs of a burned female body lying in a wooded area. Vincent claimed these were just photos from some movie he'd found funny, but the police knew exactly what they were looking at. They had found Stephanie. Vincent Stanford was immediately placed under arrest in connection with Stephanie's disappearance and likely death. The news hit the small community of Leeton like a thunderbolt. This wasn't some stranger who had wandered into town. This was someone who worked at their school, someone who had access to their children, someone they had trusted. While the arrest brought some answers, police still needed to find Stephanie's body and piece together exactly what had happened. They found her car dumped in a paddock about 8.5 kilometers from the school, but Stephanie herself remained missing. A search of Vincent's electronic devices revealed disturbing evidence that painted a picture of a deeply troubled individual. His phone and laptop contained images of underage girls, both from inside Leeton High School and from the internet. There were photos of local women he had clearly been following around town without their knowledge. The pattern that emerged was absolutely sinister. Despite not yet finding Stephanie's body, on April 9th, 4 days after her disappearance, Vincent Stanford was formally charged with her death. On April 10th, another witness came forward with crucial information. This person had seen a vehicle near a canal just before 4 p.m. on Easter Sunday. They watched as a man got out and threw what looked like a laptop into the water before speeding away. Police divers quickly recovered the laptop from the canal bottom. It was confirmed to be Stephanie's. The search for her body intensified. Police combed through fields and vineyards. Divers searched waterways. The community held its breath, hoping for closure but dreading what they might find. Finally, on April 10th, just 1 day before what should have been Stephanie and Aaron's wedding day, searchers made the discovery everyone had been hoping for and fearing. 60 miles from Leeton High School, in a patch of woodland in Cocopara National Park, they found Stephanie's remains. The scene was heartbreaking. She had been struck repeatedly. Forensic evidence showed at least 40 blows to her head, resulting in blunt force trauma that caused her death. She'd also been stabbed in the neck. Her body had then been set on fire in an apparent attempt to destroy evidence. The photographs on Vincent's camera were confirmed to be of Stephanie at this very location. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Vincent Stanford contacted police from his jail cell and said he wanted to talk. He had no idea that Stephanie's body had already been found when he decided to confess. What he told investigators was disturbing beyond imagination. Vincent described seeing Stephanie in the staff room that Easter Sunday and feeling what he called a compulsion to harm her. He immediately went home to gather what he referred to as a kit: handcuffs, a knife, cleaning supplies, and other items that revealed the premeditated nature of his crime. On his way back to the school, he made internet searches that showed his twisted intentions. Vincent returned to the school just as Stephanie was finishing her work and preparing to leave. As she walked through the hallway toward the exit, she passed him and smiled, offering her cheerful Easter greeting. That simple act of kindness, Stephanie being her naturally warm, friendly self, would be the last normal interaction of her life. Vincent grabbed her and dragged her into a storage room. Stephanie fought back with everything she had, clawing at his face and leaving the scratches that witnesses had noticed. But she was overpowered. What happened next was unspeakable. After the attack, Vincent did something that showed his complete lack of humanity. He drove home, made himself a sandwich and coffee, and calmly ate lunch. Then he returned to the school to clean up the crime scene and move Stephanie's body. He placed her in the trunk of her own car, drove it to his house, and left it parked outside while he went in to talk casually with his mother and brother. The next day, he drove to Cocopara National Park, where he disposed of her body and set it on fire. Vincent kept souvenirs from his crime, including Stephanie's engagement ring and graduation ring, which he sent to his identical twin brother Marcus in Adelaide. Marcus sold the rings and destroyed other evidence. As investigators dug deeper into Vincent's background and behavior, an even more disturbing picture emerged. Vincent had been born in Australia, but moved to the Netherlands when he was 3 years old before returning to New South Wales. He told police he had been having violent thoughts since he was 7 years old and had actually choked a teacher when he was 12. His classmates had called him psycho because of his violent outbursts. He'd been sent to a special school for behavioral problems and was later admitted to a psychiatric facility where he was diagnosed with autism and oppositional defiant disorder. After being rejected by universities and the military, Vincent had drifted through various jobs before becoming a cleaner at Leeton High School. He'd only been hired on a 5-week contract that was extended because he seemed to be doing acceptable work. But behind the scenes, Vincent had been using his access to the school for sinister purposes. He would lurk in the girls' bathrooms during lunch breaks and had been secretly photographing and stalking students. Most horrifyingly, investigators found nearly 2,000 photos of a 12-year-old girl on his phone. He had followed this child home multiple times and kept detailed notes about when she was alone and who else was in her house. One journal entry read, "Home alone 1540, time enough to abduct." Police believe this young girl was Vincent's original intended victim. And when that plan didn't work out, he turned his attention to Stephanie. The revelation that Vincent Stanford was responsible for Stephanie's death sent shockwaves through the Leeton community and beyond. Businesses closed and school classes were canceled so the community could attend a public memorial service for Stephanie. Over 1,000 people gathered to celebrate her life. Everyone wore yellow, Stephanie's favorite color. As Keith Urban's "Making Memories of Us" played, the song that should have been her and Aaron's first dance, the community released yellow balloons into the sky. It was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Vincent's twin brother Marcus was also arrested and charged for his role in destroying evidence and selling Stephanie's rings. He was sentenced to 15 months in prison and was released in October 2016. His lenient sentence sparked outrage, with nearly 60,000 people signing a petition calling for an appeal. In July 2016, Vincent Stanford finally pleaded guilty to Stephanie's assault and death, sparing her family the trauma of a lengthy trial. The judge determined that this was clearly among the worst category of such crimes. Vincent was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. At sentencing, Stephanie's mother, Marilyn, delivered a powerful victim impact statement. She said Vincent was too pathetic and inept to make a life of his own, so he chose to take a life he had no right to. She spoke of the family's unbearable grief and their need to retreat from public view to mourn their beautiful daughter. The case led to important changes in school security and employee screening procedures. Stephanie's family settled a civil case with the New South Wales Education Department, with their lawyer stating that the primary goal was ensuring that the sort of risk that Stephanie Scott was exposed to is not repeated in the future. Tragically, more heartbreak would follow for the Scott family. Just over a year after losing Stephanie, her father Robert was killed in a freak accident when a tree fell on him. He was laid to rest beside his beloved daughter. Aaron eventually moved to Europe, trying to escape the painful memories associated with New South Wales. 5 years after losing Stephanie, he found love again and became engaged to someone new. While nothing could ever replace what he lost, his ability to find happiness again would have made Stephanie proud. The story of Stephanie Scott reminds us how fragile life can be and how quickly everything can change. She was a young woman with everything to live for: a loving fiancé, a career she was passionate about, students who looked up to her, and a bright future ahead. Her case also highlights the importance of thorough background checks and security measures in our schools. Vincent Stanford had shown warning signs throughout his life, yet he was still given access to vulnerable young people. Most importantly, Stephanie's story shows us the ripple effects of violence. Her death didn't just end one life, it shattered a family, traumatized a community, and left countless people forever changed. But perhaps there is some small comfort in knowing that by catching Vincent when they did, investigators may have prevented him from harming that 12-year-old girl who was next on his list. Stephanie Scott was remembered by those who knew her as someone who embodied all that is good about humanity. She made a real difference in the lives of her students and community. Her family said she would want people to remember her for her amazing traits and her passion for teaching and helping others. As we close this case, let's take a moment to remember Stephanie not for how her life ended, but for how she lived, with kindness, dedication, and love for those around her. That's the story we want deep crime viewers to remember and carry forward. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Deep Crime. Please remember to treat these stories with the respect they deserve and keep the victims and their families in your thoughts. If you found this episode informative, please like and subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay safe out there.